I got a viewer request the other day, hey, my favorite little psycho, asking if I could explain lymph nodes, what they do, where they're located, what happens when they malfunction, and how they affect the immune system. And it's a great question because most people only think about lymph nodes when they become swollen, but they're actually a critical part of your body's immune defense system. So let's break down what lymph nodes actually do, where they're located, and what happens when this system is not working the way it should be. All right, lymph nodes are small bean-shaped structures that are part of the lymphatic system, and you can think of them as filtration checkpoints for the immune system. Your body constantly produces fluid that leaks out of blood vessels and into the surrounding tissues. And that fluid contains things like proteins, immune cells, waste products, and sometimes bacteria or viruses, toxins, any number of things. And that fluid is called lymph. So the lymphatic system collects that fluid and moves it through a network of vessels that eventually pass through lymph nodes. And inside these nodes, immune cells examine that fluid for anything that shouldn't be there, which is just wild to me. Like, you know, if you're like me, I'm picturing almost like an alien spaceship. Here comes the cell, and they're examining it and deciding, do we launch a full-scale attack? Like, what are we doing here? What's the strategy, right? It's like, I love the lymphatic system. I'm very excited that I got this question. So they're located all throughout the body, and there are actually hundreds of lymph nodes in the body, roughly 600 in total. But most people notice them in a few key areas, namely the neck, under the jaw, the armpits, and the groin. And these are areas where lymphatic vessels from large regions of the body kind of all converge. And that's why infections in the throat can cause swollen lymph nodes in the neck, or infections in the arm can cause swelling in the nodes near the armpit, and so on. How lymph nodes activate the immune system. So this is where lymph nodes become more than just filters. They're actually meeting points for immune cells as well. So inside the lymph node, you'll find different types of immune cells communicating with each other. Some cells detect pathogens and bring pieces of those pathogens, called antigens, inside the lymph node to be presented to other immune cells, like T cells and B cells. Like, this is just crazy to me. And once these cells recognize something dangerous, they activate and start coordinating an immune response. B cells begin producing antibodies that target the invader, and certain T cells can directly destroy other infected cells. So lymph nodes aren't just like filters, they're also command centers where the immune system decides how to respond to a threat. Like little strategy meeting rooms parked in key places throughout the body. I'm going to keep saying this, it's just mind-boggling to me. It's amazing. There's got to be a divine hand in there. All right, section 4, why lymph nodes swell. So most people, like I said, only notice lymph nodes when they become swollen or tender. And in many cases, that's actually a good sign. It means that the immune system has recognized something and is actively responding. Common reasons that they swell include viral infections, bacterial infections, inflammation, injuries, immune reactions, etc. So when immune cells become activated inside the node itself can enlarge. And that's why people often notice tender lymph nodes when they have the cold, the flu, another infection, things like that. Section 5, when swollen lymph nodes might need a medical evaluation. All right, now in most cases, swollen lymph nodes resolve once the infection or the inflammation that triggered them improves. But there are certain situations where health providers may investigate further. For example, lymph nodes that remain enlarged for several weeks, they continue growing, or they feel very firm and fixed in place may need to be evaluated. Another situation that tends to get our attention as health providers is swelling in certain locations, particularly around the collarbones. And these are called supraclavicular lymph nodes. And enlargement there sometimes prompts doctors or nurses to rule out more serious causes like cancers that originate in the chest or abdomen. Now, that doesn't mean that every swollen lymph node is something dangerous. Most of them are just related to infections and inflammation. But persistent swelling or unusual locations are situations where evaluation is important. Section 6. So what happens when lymphatic drainage is impaired? And a fun story, my very first surgery that I ever had was on a lymph node in my groin. And the way this happened is kind of funny. I mean, I was about, I want to say 10 years old, maybe 9. And I was down the street with my friend and I had a brand new 10-speed bike. So we were double riding. She was on the seat and I was kind of standing and pumping, and we were going between her house and mine. So, you know, not a lot of traffic on our side street, so I'm not really paying attention. And I'm turning around and talking to her over my shoulder, and I run into the back of a parked car. And when I did that, I was wearing shorts, and somehow I got impaled on the handlebar. It just, I think the plastic or the rubber covering had come off of it. It was just the metal. And when I hit the parked car, I kind of jumped on, you know, it jumped forward and it impaled me a little bit. Fast forward about a year, you know, enough that that accident was not in the forefront of my mind anymore. And I'm noticing kind of like an ache in that area. And I realize I have a huge lump there. And a little bit of context, my mom had breast cancer at 40. And, you know, I had cancer run in my family. So, you know, I ran out to my mom and I was like, Mom, I have a lump. And, you know, it just set off this cascade of her calling her oncologist and him saying, oh, you got to bring her right in, because lumps in the groin can be places that are indicative of a cancer, like testicular cancer, things like that. Not that I have them, but you get what I'm saying. And he said, no, you never sit on a lump. We're going to remove it. So you're going to have minor surgery, which took place at Overlook Hospital. And I'll never forget, you know, my whole family came, and it was like, I don't know, it was like an event. And the operating room was on the like very top floor. And the holding area that I was in, maybe it was probably peds at the time, was, you know, several floors down. So it came time for the surgery, and, you know, the nurses came and got me. And as we got into the elevator and they hit the top floor, I saw that I had like, it was probably 10, I might have been like 7 floors away. And she hits the button and we start ascending. And with each floor that dings on the elevator, I start crying harder and harder, so that by the time, you know, the elevator doors opened into the operating room, I was in like full tears, like full just losing everything. And, you know, they were kind of like, oh, hey, this is going to be super fun, you know, but that was my story. Anyway, in some cases, lymphatic drainage itself can become impaired, and this can happen after surgery, radiation therapy, infections, or certain medical conditions. When lymph fluid can't drain properly, it can lead to a condition called lymphedema, and this causes swelling in the affected areas because fluid builds up in the tissues. It's most commonly seen in the arms and legs, and you can see this develop when multiple lymph nodes are removed, like during breast cancer surgery. They'll do it like if it's a total mastectomy with nodes, they'll take the breast and then they'll do either a sampling of nodes, or they'll keep taking nodes out until they get clean margins if they do find it in lymph nodes. So after that surgery, anybody who's had lymph nodes removed, they'll likely say, you know, you can't take blood pressure, no blood pressure in that arm, no blood draws in that arm, no injections, no nothing, no IVs placed. And that's to avoid this complication. So, I mean, ultimately about 1 in 5 to about 1 in 3 women may develop that over time. And the risk can be higher if something like radiation therapy is also involved. Section 7, how to support lymphatic flow. All right, so unlike blood circulation, the lymphatic system doesn't have a central pump like the heart. Instead, it relies on muscle contractions, breathing, and body movement to move lymph around through the body. And that's one reason regular physical activity is so important. Walking, stretching, and deep breathing all help stimulate the lymphatic circulation. Staying hydrated also helps maintain proper lymph flow. And in certain medical situations, specialized therapies like manual lymphatic drainage can help people with significant swelling. So if you've ever gotten a massage and they encourage you to drink water afterwards and stay hydrated, it's because it helps normal fluid circulation in the body after that. All right, so section 8, let's clear up a common myth. Sometimes you'll hear people talking about detoxing the lymphatic system.
I think there's a detox for everything now.
But the reality is that the lymphatic system is already designed to remove waste and support immune function. That's the whole point of it, is it detoxes the body. So there's no special cleanse required, but supporting the body through, again, like regular movement, hydration, overall health can help the lymphatic system function more efficiently. Now, lymph nodes are small structures, but they play a huge role in how your immune system detects and responds to threats. So the next time you notice swollen lymph nodes during an infection, it's often just a sign that your immune system is actively doing its job. And if there are other health topics you'd like me to break down, drop them in the comments. So this video was actually inspired by a viewer request, as I said, and that's one of the perks of being a channel member, is that I see your questions and your requests quickly, and I will do a dedicated video if you ask me, and I feel it's a subject that others could benefit from. So, and also, if you're waiting for YouTube to randomly drop one of my videos in your recommended feed, you're probably missing out on a lot of content that could help you. There are over 350 videos on Lucid Med at this point. So take a minute to scroll through the library and see what topics might apply to you. And with that, thanks for watching and stay healthy and lucid.